Hello. Someone in the comments asked how I learned all these ideas and these concepts and these things. And that's a long story, but I'll start explaining how this occurred. Because it took place over a period of since I was 16 till even now and continues since then. Some parts are kind of scary, just saying. But yeah, it started with something interesting. It started with this notebook. And this was the first page I wrote at 16. It was about prosomnia, which, while this would probably go into more detail, were basically kind of like gods, but they were internal psychological beings that you could create yourself. And they allowed you to just experiment with your internal psychology. What a 16-year-old kid is doing messing with his psychology, I don't know, but that's what I did. I basically created several internal concepts such as madness and hope, fear, consumption, and memory. And then a little while later, I added life, death, love, and then something else happens. But these were then put inside a story, which is written partially in small details next to the stuff. I'm avoiding that part because that's a different context entirely. But the story is an interesting one, but it started as a psychological experiment in my head, and then it evolved into a sort of book where you explored worlds, and the idea was that you could travel between them using stories and sort of go on adventures in a sort of inspirational writing where you didn't plan the story, you just kind of wrote what happened. Kind of like a video game, but with text. It worked pretty well, I guess. Except I think I bit off something too big for me to chew when I first started the story, as my conflicts and problems that I chose, which you saw a hint of at the start of it when I showed you what was in the first page of that book. And I'll get into that after I change camera scenes. From what I remember when I was 16, the story was about conspiracies, the government, and issues with different views and different perspectives and how they didn't interact very well. Except I used symbolic imagery of zombies to demonstrate, like, not even zombies, something else, like zombies, to represent the different issues where people would fight over their perspectives for, at least to me, no apparent reason, even though I was an atheist. And I blamed a lot of stuff on belief when I was younger because I didn't like it so much. And that'll come back again several times till I eventually sort that out. But, yeah, I sort of tried to find some sort of meaning or create a meaning, because I didn't have one because I was an atheist. So I thought that just because there was no meaning didn't mean I couldn't create a meaning myself in a void from which an atheist often complains about, and that's how I felt. So I set out to look for a meaning and a purpose for existence when I viewed the world as not having one. Was that I got too obsessed with mind blows or sort of dopamine rich ideas that I thought of along the way. While that was fun, it led to the top of a tower in the story where I saw a beautiful future, but I lost touch with the ideas of science by designing that future, and there wasn't really a way to make it possible. So it sort of shattered the meaning I had created and was rather depressed for a while after that and stopped working on the story. I became so depressed I inverted everything I had worked on before then into what was basically a nightmarish world that I continued to expand and write about. But after a while, about the time I was 18, because the second part lasted about a year, I got really bored of doing that, and it wasn't going to go anywhere because it's just dark stories that have no meaning. I wrote a sort of merge back into the original story where I took apart from the first part of the story and ideas that came during the dark part, and I sort of blended them together, and something happened where I lost my mind, and yeah, it was weird. But then suddenly after that 2-week period of basically just insanity, I no longer felt depressed, and the way I saw the world had completely changed from either perspective. I saw, rather than just highs or just lows, I sort of found a happy medium between both. And I worked on a different kind of project after that. I drew a lot of pictures during that period, and I was still an atheist, but I had my own kind of simple spirituality, which was made of 7 beings, mostly unrelated to the first set. But I still rejected any concept of belief because I thought that it led to ignorance, and the whole thing was about getting to a future that wasn't the same future as that original dopamine rush thing, but it was about getting to a better place than just the modern world without virtual reality and the inability to explore other places or other worlds. So I built, and it was also about like solving problems with wisdom and saying that things that we often said were problems in nature or problems with humanity, that there were ways to fix them, and there were ways to help the world and make it better. There were 3 basic examples of that I showed. The first was you could filter CO2 rather than letting it fly off into the air. You could filter it and use the carbon for stuff, because you can do that. I don't know why they don't. You can. I showed that virtual reality was possible simply because, and I mean like complete immersion kind of stuff, because we dream. Oh, I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to build, like I thought it was with nanobots at the time, and I didn't think there was any other way. And yeah, I also thought that we were all like part of some larger being that had different eyes that I could see the world from, perceive different angles of reality from those perspectives. And I built 4 spirits to sort of guide which direction. No, it was 3. It was still 3 at the time. 3 spirits that would guide the way to a better place, which were madness for new ideas, fear for facing fears, and wisdom for learning and using the wisdom to produce novel ideas. And I drew a picture at the end of this year, which was the year after the first one. And I'll show you that picture, and you'll see what happens after that. This is the picture I drew. It represented the entirety of how I felt about the world at the time. I added these at the time. They weren't initially included, but they actually are relevant to what happened after, because almost immediately after completing this picture, I lost my mind again for an even longer period of time. And in that period, I realized that it wasn't just my idea, but it was also everything else that existed. So I started exploring the different views and perspectives that reality had, without, not in like debate form, but just as like complete belief, which means that this spirit divided into 2 and became a total of 4 spirits, which is why I brought up 4 earlier. Became about exploring everything rather than just what I thought was the case, because everything meant there was more knowledge from which to learn from, rather than just the knowledge of science. And I'd say that some people would say, well, what can faith do? And it's like, faith can do a lot. Like, religions have a lot more in them than just the words that people often propagate. So that's what I started with. It's around that time that I started using pareidolia to see objects as something other than what they were. So I kept to that, and I moved on from where I was at the time. And then, I mean, I was mostly just saying it was everything. I wasn't doing anything productive with it, because I hadn't actually brought anything into practice. And it's when I got into practice, trying to find a way to that future that I was making, that I realized that there's more than everything. Like just because everything that is doesn't mean it's all things, because everything is all that already is, and all things includes things that haven't yet been discovered. So I sort of took to building new stuff. This is really old stuff, but I started working on a lot of different projects with drawings and characters and meaning and various complicated interrelating ideas. And this was all done in a period of 2 years, and there's like so much more than just that, and that's just on my computer. And I'd say that for the most part, there is more ideas out there that can work just because I have too many on my computer. But the way you do it is mostly with the operators, which I showed. There are other ways to do it, and I'll probably get into those again, but they all work about the same. Yeah. They are very complicated at times to explain. But most of the ideas I did were either ideas I thought of myself or ideas I generated on my own. Yeah. So that's what I do now, is I make new ideas and I look for different ways to interact with the environment and everything else other than everything. And there's a lot more than just that, because I actually went through like a rampage of thought over a period of 2 years where I thought of a lot of different stuff. And not like one philosophy, but like I was jumping from one place to another, and I would think of every possible option or try to, because I don't think you can attain that. I would think of as many answers to a question as I could think of and just leave it like that. Yeah. But be cautious when doing that, because not all answers can always be pleasant, and they are just as compatible as the other ones. So it becomes frightful if you look into darker ideas, because they also exist. It's not all sunshine and rainbows in your head. What I essentially did was look at multiple positions of what reality could be, rather than just going with the one I thought was the most logical. I went with every single one, and then I'd manipulate them according to how I'd feel or was in the mood of, and still do all the time. It's never just what I say, it's always 15 other things that I didn't think of at the time.